CM Punk is joining us. First of all, thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Colin. How are you?
I'm great. And I ask you, you're 35, you're making a ton, you're beloved, you're a rock star, and you say, I'm going to go UFC. Why?
Oh, there's a ton of reasons. One, I was bored. I was tired of the wrestling. I didn't have the best relationship with my bosses.
Yeah.
You know, kind of went sideways there at the end. Not that it was ever a bed of roses. And I just had my eyes set on doing this for a long time. Back in, I want to say 2011, my contract was up, and they were trying to re-sign me. And they were trying to re-sign me for, low-ball figures. That's what they do to the guys. You know, they're indentured servants. They try to pay them the smallest amount of money you can possibly pay them. There's no health insurance. You're responsible for your own travel, your own hotels, your own food on the road. Home once a day, maybe. And I did that 10 years to get to the WWE, and then I did it 10 years there. So my gas tank was empty in that regard. But in 2011, it was kind of hanging in the balance there, and I made the decision to re-sign. And it's not that I regret that decision. It's just that if I didn't re-sign, I would have dedicated myself 100% to this. So I re-signed. That story unfolded. That chapter of my book's over with, and now I 100% dedicate myself to this now. It's just later than I anticipated, and it's a bigger challenge now because I'm older.
It's interesting because, right now, it's funny. You have such a strong brand and such a strong opinion. I wonder, in the end, what made you a star as a wrestler actually ended your career is that you're just not going to let anybody dictate terms. And in the end, what made you a wrestling star is what made you leave is you're your own guy, and wrestling wants you to be a puppet.
There's definitely that aspect of it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now it's better. Now it's better, bud.
Okay, good. That's definitely an aspect to it. And I have a reputation, I suppose, of being a jerk or, an asshole or whatever, and people have all these varying stories about, I met him on the street and he was a total jerk, or I met him on the street and he was an angel. I just, my entire life, I don't suffer fools. You know what I mean? So chances are, if you've had a bad experience with me, that was more because of you than me.
I was disappointed. I said to my fans earlier, you should put your arms around CM Punk if you're a UFC fan, because the bigger this sport is, the more networks that will vie for it, and the more often eventually that UFC will be on free TV or in your cable package. You don't want to have to search to always find it. Are you surprised there has been some pushback from UFC fans saying, who is this guy?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I grew up like a punk rock kid in Chicago, and so I saw like bizarre elitism at like an early age. People kind of latch onto certain bands when they first start, and they want to say that they saw their first show and this and this and that. And when a band gets big or it breaks or it signs to a big label, you got all these people crying sellout. But it's just like, I know not everybody's end game is to make money, but if you stay true to yourself and you're still doing, your art or your sport or whatever it is, and somebody wants to give you a paycheck for that, like, you're not less of a human being for doing that. I do find it strange though that there are those fringe fans that are just, I think maybe they love something so much that they're so in love with it that they want to try to protect it. And I think for whatever reason, somebody like myself, fighting in the UFC somehow, I don't know, degrades the sport or something like that. But I always just think at the end of the day, there's two human beings locked inside a cage that are trying to hurt each other. You can't really degrade that. You know what I mean? Like there's something pure about it that nobody that's outside that cage can touch. So do I think I'm ruining the sport? No, absolutely not. Do I know that there's people that are going to say that and cry that? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't got to see them on a daily basis. And when I want to shut them off, I just don't read my Twitter.
What's your fighting discipline? What's your background, your fighting discipline?
I've definitely done jiu-jitsu longer than anything else. Being on the road so long with WWE is hard to find gyms and hard to train on the regular. But I would say I'm a jiu-jitsu fighter, unless I want to be like one of those wacky guys that says I'm like a kung fu artist or something like that. But I've never done kung fu either, and it would just be for the laugh.
This sport has some stars: Rousey, Holm, John Bones Jones, McGregor, Daniel Cormier. Do you worry that you're bigger than all of them, actually, if you consider the popularity of wrestling? There will be some resentment in the sport at all for UCM?
I don't worry about it. I mean, that's the human beings are going to be human beings. I recognize that that'll come, but I have found that most fighters, after I've met them and hung out with them, maybe, broke bread with them or, just talked to them for a little bit, they go, oh, shit, you know what? Hey, that guy's not bad. He's not so bad. Yeah, good for him, Because at the end of the day, there's my ass on the line. I could walk in there, hey, Mickey Gall, he could do what he says he's going to do. He could finish me in one round. But I could also go in there and I could finish Mickey outside of 15 seconds. That's the beauty of the sport, and we're going to find out on September 10th.
You are known as straight edge. You know who you remind me of? You ever know who Henry Rollins is? Yeah. You remind me of him. Very convicted.
Well, thank you. I take it as a compliment.
Yeah, you should. He's great. He's a legend. And you remind me of Henry Rollins, that you're not going to take anybody's crap, and you don't care if you're popular. I'm agnostic, so I looked you up last night, and I know your convictions on that. And I look at you, and I think to myself, here's this guy that has decided I'm going pure. How did you not, and maybe this is inappropriate, how did you stay in wrestling knowing your purity and authenticity and knowing everybody around you didn't live by the same standards?
Well, it wasn't for their lack of trying to get me to drink or anything else. It's just nothing that interested me. I think I was fortunate that at an early age, I had a strong sense of who I was, and I never saw a reason to do anything that I never wanted to do to, fit in, gain friends, gain acceptance. It just didn't make sense to me, because at the end of the day, you gotta, you lay your head down on the pillow, or you look at yourself in the mirror. You're the one that you got to live with, people who want me to drink, just because for whatever reason I make them nervous that I don't. You don't need those people in your life anyway.
If a wrestling fan said, come on, this is a money grab, you're not really convicted, you're going to do this 2 or 3 fights, what would you say to him?
What's wrong with doing it just 2 or 3 fights? That's a lot of money. I was the guy in wrestling that always had an exit stretch. I was always saying, I gotta get out of here. You know what I mean? That's why I'm just flabbergasted that people are actually like, whoa, he left. I was surrounded by a lot of old timers on the independent scene before I went to WWE. They were always like, kid, you got to get out. You got to get in to get out. You can make a stupid amount of money, but you stick around, you wear it, you're welcome. Something bad's going to happen. Kurt Hennig told me that. Harley Race told me that. Guys that were legends in the sport, and they made their money, and for whatever reason, they didn't get out. And I always looked at that like, well, I'm going to listen to the old wise sages. You know what I mean? And,
sure.
And I'm going to get in to get out. Hell, I know people think, this is a publicity stunt. I'm never going to step foot in the octagon. I look forward to proving them wrong. But to me, it's not super far-fetched to be like, well, you know what? What if I put 3 or 4 wins together? Who's to say I don't get a title shot? I'm a very positive-thinking person. Of course, I'm not going to saddle myself with this negativity that, that's it. That's it for me. Because to me in life, it's so cliche and it sounds so corny and it's Karate Kid-like, but it's not about you getting knocked down. It's about how many times you get up, and that's why I train the way I do. I get knocked down in training every day. So on September 10th, I won't get knocked down. But, to wrestling fans who say, oh, this is BS, and, the ones that say I'm going to fight one time are the same ones that are now saying that I'm never going to make it to the octagon. And, that's for them to say. They're entitled to their opinion, but I'll prove them all wrong.
Chicago, Milwaukee, you live near the Midwest. If you're ever out in Los Angeles, stop by the couch. We'd love to have you on.
Oh, yeah, I would love to do that. I got a lot of friends in L.A. I will. I'll take you up on that if I'm ever there.